almost 30 years. I grew up as a rather simple country boy in a little town, a little place called Barongarook West, just south of Colac in Victoria. And I was one of a family of 10. My family were farmers, and in fact most of my brothers today are still farmers. And I spent quite a few years working in an organisation which we won't discuss, but through that period I was put through a number of very intensive training areas, and I learned about many different things related to banking, to finance, and to certain global issues. And when I first started on this, I didn't understand quite where this was taking me or what the purpose was. Eventually, in 1989, I met up with a gentleman in the United States called Michael McKnight. And Michael brought me into a company called Mid-America Development and Management Corporation. And they were involved in some rather peculiar things. One of those things was moving money, and I learned a lot from them on how to process unusual transactions, why these were being done. There was nothing sinister in what they were doing. They did these transactions for a number of governments around the world. And then from there, I was sent to Cambodia. Again, I was not told why I needed to go to Cambodia. I was just told, you go to Cambodia. When you get there, you'll meet this particular man, and you just wait there, and the right people will eventually contact you, which is exactly what happened. And then through this, I met with His Excellency Dr. A.C. Dan, who had been appointed back in 1988 as the International Treasury Controller. And at that time, what was operating was the tripartite Gold Commission, which operated in The Hague. He had been a commissioner on that on the commission, and later the commission was wound up in 1994, having served its full 50-year term from 1944 until 1944. 1944 till 1994. And then he was appointed as the sole arbitrator on the global accounts. I met him it would have been in February in 1997, after I had arrived in Cambodia. At first, I was very reluctant to believe what the people were telling me about him, because it just didn't seem logical that you'd find such a man in Cambodia, but that's where he was. Primarily because he was a Cambodian, he loved his own country, and he didn't see why he needed to work in New York or in Geneva when he could do the same job in Cambodia. So over a period of time, we got to know each other. Our first meeting was very strange. He asked me some questions, what I would do in certain circumstances, and I responded to that. And then it came a question, and he said, then what would you do with the money? I said, you need it tracked, or do you need to move the money without it being tracked? And he said, without being tracked. So I said to him, okay, this is what we would do. And I explained to him about a situation where we would move money from Philadelphia to Bahamas, and what the process was in the Bahamas, and then how the money moved from there without any trace on it. He then asked me the name of the company, and I told him the name of the company, and he said, well, what do you know about this company? And I told him that this company is controlled by a particular group of trustees, and I named who the trustees were. And at this time, I noticed there's a bit of a glint in his eye. And he's looking at me very intently, and he said to me, okay, well, who controls those particular trustees? And I said, well, they're controlled by the New World trustees. And he said, what do you know about the New World trustees? I said, well, it's interesting because nobody seems to know anything about. He said, besides there's a little box sitting on the table, very highly polished little rosewood box. He said, open that box. So I opened the box. He said, take out one of the cards. Read it to me. And on Dr. Racey, chairman, the New World trustees. So at that particular point, that was my introduction to Dr. Dan. We discussed things for over a number of days. And he asked me to check some accounts. I went back to my old friend Michael McKnight, and he went into the Chicago Fed, and I'd given him the codes so that he could open the screens and check certain accounts. So he went in, he opened the screens, and he came back. He called me, it was 2:30 in the morning when he called me, and he said to me, this world is full of flakes, but your dear Dr. Dan is not one of them. When I opened that screen, he said he would not even know 1% of the accounts in his name, controlled by him. He wouldn't know 1%. He couldn't. He said they are in the tens of thousands. And let me tell you, he said, when it comes to gold, the only name that matters in this world is Dr. Racey Dan. That's the only name that matters. That, for me, was a complete confirmation of exactly why I was sent to Cambodia.